Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the strangest, sleepiest chapters of mid-century America. The rise of Miltown, the tranquilizer that took 1950s suburbia by storm. Not the glamorous Hollywood pills, not the neon-coloured capsules of modern pharmaceutical ads. I mean the real deal, the chalky little tablet that turned stressed-out housewives into what magazines lovingly called relaxed citizens, and what doctors privately called "please stop requesting refills, Carol." So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And thank you for suggesting this topic. It was such a strange, fascinating world to wander through with you. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is, because somewhere out there it is absolutely 3:17 a.m. and someone is wondering whether they too were almost prescribed Miltown in another lifetime. Now dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soothing background hum, pull your blanket up and get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet in, not because rats are coming, but because the spirit of 1950s advertising might slip in and tell you that you're not relaxed enough for your husband's return. Let's pause and ask the real questions here. Ever wonder what drove an entire generation of suburban mums to line up for a pill like it was the latest iPhone? Did Miltown actually relax people, or did it just make folding laundry feel like an Olympic sport you were too blissfully mellow to compete in? What did a day on tranquilizers look like when your to-do list included ironing shirts, hosting Tupperware parties, and pretending you enjoyed tuna casserole? Why did your doctor prescribe it with the same enthusiasm most of us reserve for recommending our favourite streaming show? And how many 1950s marriages survived solely because both partners were too sedated to start an argument? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in 1955 America, in a pastel kitchen full of chrome appliances you're expected to adore. There's a casserole in the oven, a newspaper on the table, and a tiny white pill by the sink, your new best friend, your silent therapist, your chemical vacation Miltown. Good luck. You open your eyes in a world buzzing with Cold War anxiety, suburban perfectionism, and casseroles that could double as building materials. Into this tight-lipped, stress-stuffed atmosphere walks Miltown, the little white tablet that promises something radical: relaxation. Before long, it's flying off pharmacy shelves faster than your neighbour can say, "Have you tried not worrying?" Let's talk about that world you just woke up in. It's 1955 and everyone looks calm on the outside, but inside, they're vibrating like tuning forks. You can feel it in the air, the pressure to smile, the pressure to succeed, the pressure to keep your hedges trimmed to a height scientists still haven't fully explained. Every day is a fresh opportunity for nuclear threats, televised perfection, and your neighbour Janet bragging about her homemade gelatin mould shaped like a pineapple wearing a hat. Anxiety isn't a secret, it's the national pastime. And then comes Miltown. If anxiety was the unofficial mascot of the decade, Miltown becomes the cheerfully sedated chaperone telling everyone to take it easy, honey. This pill doesn't arrive quietly. It bursts onto the scene like a celebrity entering a party late, with flair, gossip, and half the room suddenly pretending they knew it before it was cool. Doctors hand it out with the enthusiasm of people distributing coupons. Magazines call it a miracle. Pharmaceutical reps describe it as the future of calm, which sounds suspiciously like a threat. You take your first pill and for a moment everything softens. Not in a dangerous way, more like someone draped your brain in a freshly warm towel. The static in your thoughts dims. The edges round out. Your shoulders drop a full inch. You stop caring that you've got 8 loads of laundry, a school bake sale, and children who behave like caffeinated squirrels. Suddenly, you're gliding through life like a woman in a detergent commercial, minus the forced smile. But let's be honest, Miltown didn't get famous just because it worked. It became a cultural event because everyone was struggling and no one wanted to admit it. The world had just survived a world war. entered a new invisible one, and was now trying to live up to an architecture of perfect family life, designed mostly by advertisers and men who never had to fold a fitted sheet. You didn't discuss your anxiety. You hosted it politely while trimming crusts off sandwiches. Having a pill that promised peace without confession, that was revolutionary. Before long, Miltown was everywhere, in purses, in kitchen drawers, in bathroom cabinets next to the lavender hand soap no one used. Even celebrities whispered about it. If you stood still long enough in a supermarket, someone would offer you one. If TikTok existed, Miltown would have had its own trending sound. Doctors watched prescriptions skyrocket and acted surprised, even though they were prescribing it the way Oprah gives away cars. You get a Miltown and you get a Miltown, and your husband gets one too because he yelled at the sprinkler system again. And this was the brilliance of the moment. Miltown didn't just sedate a nation, it reflected it. The pill was an answer to a question no one spoke aloud. What if we can't keep up with the world we built? What if the fantasy of effortless suburban bliss is just exhausting? What if pretending everything is fine only makes it harder to breathe? So America reached for the pill that promised a pause, a breath, a moment to unclench your jaw. It didn't fix the Cold War, or your marriage, or Janet's gelatin monstrosities, but it made surviving them feel a little easier. And as you sit there, suspended in this pastel-coloured pressure cooker, you realise Miltown wasn't just a medication. It was a cultural mirror, reflecting a nation trying desperately to appear calm while quietly, collectively losing its mind. Good luck out there. Your doctor is a pleasant, slightly overwhelmed man who smokes indoors and recommends pills the way modern influencers recommend protein powders. He listens to your stress for approximately 8 seconds before sliding a Miltown sample across the desk like he's dealing cards in Vegas. Let's take a moment to really look at him. His white coat is crisp, but his shirt is wrinkled in ways that suggest he slept in it. The room smells faintly of tobacco, disinfectant, and the quiet despair of someone who has seen one too many PTA mothers burst into tears over improperly folded linens. He's got a stethoscope around his neck, mostly decorative, and a wall of medical diplomas that look more like props than proof. This man is tired. Tired of coughs, tired of worry, tired of everyone asking whether nuclear fallout can get into the casserole. And honestly, he relates to you more than he'll ever admit. When you begin describing your life, the chores, the marriage, the pressure to keep your home so clean it could pass a military inspection, he nods sympathetically. But he's not taking notes. He's thinking about lunch. He's thinking about his next smoke break. He's thinking about whether he remembered to lock his car. And somewhere around the moment you mention feeling overwhelmed, he reaches instinctively for the sample drawer. It's muscle memory at this point, like checking the rearview mirror or apologising to strangers for no reason. He pulls out a small box of Miltown, taps it thoughtfully like he's testing a deck of cards, and hands it to you with the solemnity of a man bestowing ancient wisdom. Take one when needed, he says, even though the unspoken message is, take one when your husband says something stupid. This is the medical landscape of the 1950s. If it moves, sedate it. If it cries, sedate it. If it appears stressed by the weight of impossible cultural expectations, sedate it and offer a pamphlet titled How to Smile at Your Problems. Therapy is for eccentrics, meditation is something only monks do, and yoga is just stretching in socks, which he absolutely does not approve of. Your doctor's office is a fascinating place though, part medical space, part confessional booth, part casual cigarette lounge. You sit on the paper-covered exam table, which crinkles loudly under you, making you feel like a sandwich being wrapped. The blood pressure cuff squeezes your arm with the enthusiasm of someone trying to wring out a dish towel, and the doctor hums thoughtfully as he reaches for his prescription pad, a tool he wields with the confidence of a man who deeply believes in penmanship and pharmaceutical miracles. He asks the standard questions. Sleeping okay? You hesitate. He writes down insomnia. Eating well? You shrug. He writes down loss of appetite. Feeling stressed? You nod. He writes down anxiety, underlines it twice, then circles it for fun. You could tell him you're turning into a bat at night and he'd say, interesting, and still prescribe Miltown, and then he gives you the speech. The calm, soothing, absolutely identical speech he gives to every other patient. You just need a little something to take the edge off. Modern life is stressful. These will help you relax. They're safe, gentle, and very fashionable right now. Fashionable. He actually uses the word fashionable, which tells you everything you need to know about the medical climate of the era. Before you leave, he adds a final comforting phrase. Come back if you need more, and you will. Not because you're addicted, though that line blurs quickly, but because returning to the doctor gives you a moment of silence where nobody asks where their socks went. As you step back into the sunshine with your tiny white samples in hand, you realise something. Your doctor may not have cured your stress, but he certainly validated it. In his own exhausted, nicotine-scented way, he gave you permission to feel the way you do. And in the 1950s, that might be the closest thing to therapy you're going to get. You stare at your schedule. Breakfast, children, laundry, ironing, shopping, cleaning, dinner, bedtime, collapse. Repeat. The world expects you to smile while doing it all, and if the smile shakes, well, there's a pill for that now. Let's sit with that schedule for a moment, because it's not a list, it's an endurance race disguised as domestic bliss. From the second your eyes open, you're launched into a conveyor belt of expectations that would make a modern sea weep into their kombucha. You're supposed to glide through it in heels, pearls, and lipstick that never smudges, looking like you woke up inside a department store window display. You're not just a housewife, you're the chief executive of everything that must stay perfect. But underneath the immaculate apron and the cheerful greeting at the door, the anxiety hums constantly, quiet, persistent, like a refrigerator that's on the verge of breaking but pretending it's fine. You feel it when the baby cries, when the roast burns, when the washing machine jams again. You feel it when the neighbour drops by unannounced, forcing you to sweep your entire soul under the rug because she absolutely cannot find out you haven't dusted the top of the bookshelf since Eisenhower took office. By midday, you've already lived 3 lives. You've fed small humans who reject 70% of what you cook. You've ironed your husband's shirts until the smell of hot cotton becomes a personality trait. You've made beds, cleaned dishes, and sanitized countertops like a woman auditioning for a wartime propaganda poster. Your spine? Gone. Your sanity? On hiatus. Your patience? Holding on by a single thread woven by an angel. But you smile anyway, because the world has told you that to be a good woman is to appear effortlessly put together, even when you're one spilled casserole away from a mild breakdown. And that's where Miltown sneaks into the story. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives as a quiet suggestion from your doctor, a whisper among friends, a little white tablet tucked into the corner of your vanity drawer. Just take one if the day feels like too much, they tell you. Spoiler, the day always feels like too much. Your nerves are so fried you could plug a lamp into them. So you take the pill. At first, you don't tell anyone. Not because it's shameful, but because it feels like cheating. Like you've found an emotional backdoor into coping. But slowly something changes. The roar of your to-do list becomes a gentle hum. The panic softens. You stop hovering 6 inches above the ground in worry and settle back into your body. You can breathe again. Maybe for the first time in years. Laundry still piles up. Children still scream. Dinner still burns if you forget it. But you are less combustible. Outside, society keeps its expectations as rigid as ever. Women are supposed to be the emotional thermostat of the home, the steady, serene figure who always knows where everyone's socks are and can clean a bathroom faster than fear can form. But no one asks you how you're holding up. No one asks why your hands shake when you iron. No one asks why your chest tightens every time the phone rings. Miltown becomes the unspoken glue holding it all together, the invisible cushion between you and the avalanche of daily demands. It's not a cure, not really, but it's a buffer, a softening, a momentary detangling of the knots the world ties in your mind. And as you sit there in your pristine kitchen, apron tied tight, casserole bubbling in the oven, you finally realize something. The perfection everyone demands from you was never sustainable. It was never real. It was a shadow you were expected to chase. Now, at least you can sit down between the chaos and breathe. You shuffle into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, where breakfast consists of black coffee, a cigarette, and, if it's one of those mornings, a Miltown tablet dissolving under your tongue like a tiny, chalky surrender flag. The sun isn't even fully up yet, but somehow the expectations of the day have already formed a line outside your brain, like they're waiting to buy concert tickets. You can practically feel them tapping their feet. The coffee percolator burbles in the corner, sputtering like it's judging you for needing it again. The kitchen smells like cigarette smoke, scorched toast, and mild resentment, your own, gently rising like steam. You take a sip of your coffee, strong enough to legally classify as a weapon, and feel it slap you awake in the rudest way possible. Then comes the cigarette, your other morning companion. You light it with a flick that suggests both resignation and ritual. The smoke curls through the kitchen like a lazy ghost who refuses to leave your house. You inhale deeply, exhale dramatically, and pretend it's helping. This is your version of self-care. No matcha, no yoga. Just caffeine, nicotine, and pharmaceutical-grade serenity. Most mornings you try to hold yourself together with just coffee and willpower. But some days demand extra reinforcement. Your hand drifts toward the Miltown bottle, sitting innocently next to the salt shaker, as if it belongs there. You slide a tablet under your tongue and let it soften into chalky calm. You can almost hear your nerves sigh in relief as the chemical wave spreads. Breakfast of champions. This is the 1950s wellness routine. Forget modern advice. No green smoothies, no mindfulness apps, no podcasts about optimizing your sleep cycle. The only cycle anyone's optimizing here is how quickly they can go from stressed to functional. Everything from the coffee to the cigarette to the pill exists for one purpose: to keep you running just long enough to face a day that already feels too long. Outside, the world is spinning faster than anyone can admit. The Cold War simmers. Suburban lawns must be perfect. Neighbours are always watching. Your husband wants dinner ready by 5. Your children want waffles shaped like animals. Even the mailman judges you, and he doesn't even know he's doing it. It's no wonder half the country is starting their day with a stimulant, a sedative, and a thin layer of denial. As the pill dissolves, you feel your morning panic slow to a manageable pulse. It's not gone, it's just muffled, like someone wrapped your anxiety in a heavy wool blanket and told it to take a nap. Suddenly the day's tasks feel survivable. Laundry? Sure. Grocery shopping? Fine. Ironing an entire week's worth of shirts? Slightly terrible, but no longer a crime against humanity. The cigarette burns down as you sip your coffee, with a new chemically assisted sense of acceptance. The kitchen clock ticks loudly behind you, a sound you usually find irritating but today feels more like a quiet metronome, keeping your life in rhythm. Even the kids screaming in the other room, usually a sign that something is either broken or on fire, sound like distant birds. And here's the hilarious part. Everyone around you is doing some variation of this same routine. Your neighbour across the street is probably stirring her coffee with one hand while shaking a pill into the other. The woman next door smokes so much before breakfast, her house might qualify as a chimney. The men downtown chain smoke through meetings like nicotine-powered locomotives while discreetly popping their own relaxation aids. The whole country is held together by tension and tranquilizers. You take another sip of your bitter coffee and flick ash into the tray, feeling ready, well, ready-ish, for whatever the world throws at you next. You don't feel amazing. You don't feel energized. But you feel steady, like you've put sandbags around your emotional foundation for the day. And in 1955, that counts as wellness. Your neighborhood looks peaceful. Trimmed lawns, pastel houses, calm facades. But behind every white picket fence lurks unpaid bills, marital tension, bored housewives, screaming kids, and the quiet pressure to appear fine. From the outside, this place looks like a postcard come to life. Every house painted a shade of optimism, every porch polished, every window sparkling in the morning sun. It's the kind of neighborhood advertisers love. Mothers in aprons, fathers in ties, children playing hopscotch under a sky that always seems suspiciously blue. But the truth, hiding behind those perfect hedges, is that everyone here is hanging on by a thread woven out of caffeine, expectations, and the sheer force of pretending. You take a walk down the street and can practically feel the tension humming from house to house, like electricity running under the pavement. Mrs. Henderson waves at you from her doorway, smiling a little too brightly, trying to keep her voice steady while her kids reenact a small-scale civil war in the living room. Next door, Mr. Parker is sweeping his driveway for the third time this morning, because sweeping is easier than acknowledging the argument he had with his wife at breakfast. Across the road, Mrs. Campbell stares blankly at her laundry line, trying to decide whether she's quietly losing her mind or simply bored enough to feel like she is. This is suburbia in the 1950s. Quiet streets, tidy yards, and an emotional undertow that could drag an Olympic swimmer into the abyss. The pressure to appear perfect is everywhere, woven into conversations, baked into casseroles, stitched into every outfit. You're taught from birth that a good life looks a particular way. A husband who provides, children who behave, a home that sparkles, and a woman who manages it all without ever letting her mascara smudge. Any hint that things might not be perfect is treated like a contagious disease. So instead of asking for help, everyone simply nods, smiles, and lies with the enthusiasm of a politician. And it's not just the adults. Even the kids feel it. They sense the tension simmering under the surface, the hushed conversations, the tight smiles, the overly cheerful dinner table chatter. Children adapt by becoming louder, wilder, or in some cases eerily quiet. Your own kids seem to alternate between running laps around the sofa and staring you down as if waiting for you to crack. They don't understand what the Cold War is, but they know something is cold. Then there's the money. Oh, the money. No matter how good things look from the street, inside every house someone is calculating, recalculating, and quietly panicking over finances. Appliances break, cars need repairs, bills pile up, families stretch their budgets thinner than the meatloaf recipe everyone swears is just as good as the original. The stress builds quietly, like steam in a pressure cooker with a faulty valve. And marriage? Well, let's just say the 1950s version of partnership comes with its own set of challenges. You and your spouse communicate in a delicate dance of politeness, sarcasm, and deep sighs. You argue about money, children, chores, and whether or not your mother-in-law staying just a few more days is a personal attack. But you do it all behind closed doors, because a good marriage is supposed to look effortless, even when the effort could qualify as an Olympic sport. So the neighborhood stays perfect, or at least it looks that way. People clip their hedges, scrub their porches, and wave politely at each other like extras in a movie about happiness. But if you listen closely, really listen, you can hear the truth beneath it all. A collective sigh, a shared exhaustion, a quiet plea for relief. It's no wonder Miltown takes off here. This place isn't a suburb, it's a stress incubator dressed up like paradise. And everyone, whether they admit it or not, is desperately searching for something, anything, that makes the pressure feel a little less suffocating. You show up to the PTA meeting or the weekly Tupperware demonstration feeling suspiciously serene. Everyone else looks equally relaxed. No one acknowledges this. The party buzzes like a sedated beehive. You take a seat in a folding chair that squeaks under you, the kind of chair that normally heightens your anxiety just by existing. Today, though, it barely registers. The room smells faintly of perfume, plastic, and the lingering smoke drifting in from the hallway where someone is enjoying what is absolutely not their first cigarette of the afternoon. There's a display of pastel-coloured Tupperware containers on the table, stacked in cheerful towers like tiny plastic monuments to domestic optimism. In another decade there'll be vintage collectibles. Right now they're just overpriced bowls you're expected to squeal over. The PTA president, a woman whose voice normally sounds like a rotary phone dying, speaks with an uncharacteristic softness, almost dreamy. She moves through the agenda like someone reading bedtime stories underwater. Fundraisers, field trips, bake sales. Her words float through the air, cushioned by the unmistakable haze of mild sedation. You nod politely, even when you don't understand what you're nodding about. It's fine. Everything is fine. The room has the energy of a yoga class no one signed up for. Across from you, Helen, always tense, always close to tears, sits blissfully at ease, stirring her coffee with the wrong end of a spoon and not caring at all. Earlier this week, she was crying about her husband forgetting their anniversary. Today she smiles like she's just heard a pleasant secret. You suspect the secret is Miltown. The Tupperware hostess begins her demonstration, snapping lids onto containers with exaggerated enthusiasm. Normally these meetings are loud, chaotic affairs, people talking over her, toddlers melting down, someone dropping a plate of cookies. But today, silence, concentration. A gentle round of woos, like everyone is admiring fireworks instead of plastic storage. You try to imagine this same gathering without tranquilizers, pure chaos. Someone would have burned themselves on the coffee urn. Someone else would have made passive-aggressive comments about last month's bake sale. A mother would be wrestling a child under the table like it's WrestleMania, and the PTA president would be sweating harder than a senator during a scandal. But today, everyone is floating. Even the kids seem calmer, as if the Miltown effect is radiating outward like second-hand serenity. Halfway through the meeting, refreshments appear. Coffee so strong it could legally enlist in the military, and cookies baked into the texture of coasters. You sip politely, the caffeine hitting your bloodstream only to be promptly cancelled out by the pill you took an hour ago. You feel like a very calm person inside a very energetic cup of coffee. Then comes the socializing. Normally, this is where anxiety spikes. You'd have to feign interest in someone's new vacuum cleaner, or listen to Judy talk about her child's advanced motor skills, which absolutely do not exist. But today, you glide from conversation to conversation, like a ghost who does small talk. You compliment someone's dress. You admire a casserole recipe you'll never cook. You nod sagely at discussions of school policy, even though you have no idea what policy is. No one mentions medication, not directly. Instead, they use phrases like, "I feel so relaxed lately," or "I've been sleeping great," or the classic, "I just feel more balanced." If your eyes met theirs at the wrong second, you'd both share an unspoken understanding. We're all chemically smoothing the edges here, and thank goodness for that. As the meeting comes to a close, the Tupperware hostess hands out order forms. Everyone signs up for at least one item, not because they need it, but because saying no requires more emotional energy than anyone in this room currently possesses. You buy a cereal keeper. You don't even eat cereal. Walking back to your car, the evening breeze feels softer than usual, the streetlights a little warmer, the world a little less sharp. Social obligations used to drain you. Now they feel like drifting through a cloud of acquaintances who are just as mellow as you are. It's not friendship, it's not connection. But in 1955, it's close enough. Your husband strolls in after work, exhausted from traffic, capitalism, and wearing a suit all day. His doctor, also smoking indoors, prescribes Miltown so he'll stop yelling at the lawnmower. He drops his briefcase on the floor with the dramatic thud of a man who has fought both his boss and the freeway and lost to both. His tie is crooked, his shirt is damp from sweat and frustration, and he smells faintly of aftershave, cigarette smoke, and the slow decay of corporate hope. This is the 1950s male, proud, exhausted, and one malfunctioning appliance away from a meltdown. For years, society has told him he's supposed to be a rock, emotionless, steady, immune to the pressures that make everyone else crumble. But rocks crack, and your husband has been cracking ever since that argument with the washing machine last spring. At first, his stress showed up in subtle ways, sighing too loudly, muttering darkly about the stock market, glaring at squirrels. Then one day he kicked the lawnmower so hard it left a dent shaped like regret. That's when his doctor stepped in. His doctor is a familiar type, cheerful, overworked, wearing a white coat that hasn't been truly white in years. He listens to your husband describe his stress, traffic jams, rising bills, the crushing weight of being the provider, and nods sympathetically. Then, without missing a beat, he reaches into his drawer of wonders and pulls out a Miltown sample like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. "Take these," he says. "Tap in the bottle like it's a genie's lamp. They'll help. Or at least make you stop shouting at inanimate objects." At first, your husband is skeptical. Pills are for nerves, and nerves are, in his mind, a feminine flaw. But masculinity bends when the lawn won't mow, and the toaster sparks like it's possessed. One tablet later, he feels a warm fog settle over him. Not sleepy, not high, just softened, like someone sanded down the jagged edges of his day. Slowly he becomes less reactive. The faucet drips. He shrugs. The newspaper reports economic doom. He flips to the comics. The neighbour's dog won't stop barking. Instead of waging psychological warfare, he simply closes the window. You almost don't recognise this calm, contented man who used to grumble like a diesel engine. Soon, tranquilizers aren't just a women's thing. They're trending among men in grey flannel suits, men whose mental health is held together by coffee, repression, and the hope of a quiet evening. Offices become slightly more bearable. Commutes become survivable. Even the boss seems less terrifying. Or maybe he's also on Miltown. Hard to tell. Dinner time becomes a gentler event. Instead of ranting about traffic, he reclines at the table, asks politely about your day, and compliments the meatloaf without passive-aggressive commentary. The children approach him cautiously at first, confused by his new serenity. They poke him like scientists testing a specimen. "Is Dad okay?" they whisper. He smiles vaguely and tells them to finish their vegetables in a tone so calm it almost feels illegal. You find yourselves arguing less too. Not because any problems have been solved. Those are still stacked in the garage like forgotten Christmas decorations. But because neither of you has the energy to escalate. Every disagreement fizzles out in a haze of "it's fine" and "let's not think about it right now." It's marital détente by medication. As weeks go by, you notice a quiet shift in the neighbourhood. Husbands wave more. They complain less. There are fewer tools thrown across lawns. The collective male rage that once powered suburbia like an emotional generator has dimmed to a friendly hum. Miltown, once marketed almost exclusively to women, has officially crossed the gender line, not because men suddenly felt safe talking about stress, but because the pills worked, and because the alternative was more dented lawn equipment. Your husband isn't perfect. He still snores. He still forgets where he put his keys. He still thinks grilling counts as helping with dinner. But he's calmer now, less like a ticking time bomb, and more like a man floating gently through the demands of mid-century life. And honestly, for both of you, this might be the first real peace you've had in years. You sit at the kitchen table wondering if you're happy, or just chemically muted. Everything feels soft, like your brain is wrapped in a freshly warm towel from a hotel you can't afford to visit. It's a strange sensation, this new emotional landscape, like wandering through your own mind with the lights dimmed and the volume turned down. The familiar sharp edges of stress, irritation, and existential dread have all been sanded into smooth, manageable pebbles. You roll them around mentally, but nothing cuts you anymore. Nothing pierces. Nothing quite reaches you. You take a sip of your coffee, now lukewarm, because time moves differently when you're slightly sedated, and you try to remember what normal used to feel like. Was happiness ever sharp? Was joy ever bright? You vaguely recall laughing once, loudly, at something your child said, but the memory hovers like a distant radio signal, fuzzy, pleasant, unreachable. Your surroundings feel oddly padded. The kitchen clock ticks softly instead of nagging you. The mail on the table looks less like a stack of financial threats, and more like colourful rectangles waiting patiently for attention. Even the sink full of dishes seems philosophical, as if it's saying, "We'll get done eventually," or not. Either way is fine. Tranquilizers do this, blurring the line between peace and numbness until they merge into one long, slow exhale. You don't feel bad, but you don't exactly feel good either. You feel muted, as if someone lowered the emotional contrast on your life. Your husband walks into the kitchen and says something about needing gas for the car, but his voice feels like it's arriving through a soft filter. You nod, not entirely sure what he said, but confident it wasn't urgent. He seems calmer too, or maybe you just perceive him through your new foggy lens, where everyone looks slightly more tolerable. Outside, the neighbourhood hums with the quiet chaos of mid-century life. Dogs barking, children shrieking, someone mowing their lawn out of spite. Normally, these sounds grate on your nerves. Today they blend together into a soft, distant soundtrack. Life on mute. You sit still for a long moment, wondering whether you should be worried about your new emotional serenity. But worrying takes effort, and effort is exactly what you no longer have access to. Instead, you tilt your head and consider the question with detached curiosity. Is this happiness? Or is this a temporary vacation from my own feelings? Tranquilizers promise relief, not enlightenment. They ease the pressure, but they don't solve the puzzle beneath it. You're still the same person with the same laundry and the same obligations and the same deeply suppressed dreams, but now everything is covered in a light coating of it's fine. You get up to check on the kids. They're arguing over a toy, loudly, dramatically, passionately. Normally you'd intervene with the speed of a referee at a championship game. Today you simply watch, feeling like an anthropologist observing curious wildlife. Their shrieks sound like musical notes plucked by tiny, furious violins. The fog doesn't make you uncaring. It just shifts your distance from things. The stakes feel lower. The urgency dissolves. Even your own emotions pass through a sort of slow-motion filter. When frustration rises, it doesn't spike. It floats. When sadness creeps in, it doesn't sting. It gently taps your shoulder and then wanders off. And this makes you wonder, is this what men feel all the time? Is this the emotional baseline they've been hiding from you? If so, you can see why they guard it like a secret recipe. You return to the kitchen table, fold your hands and breathe out slowly. You used to think happiness was a bright spark. Now you suspect it might just be the absence of panic. Or maybe happiness and numbness are cousins, sharing a border so thin that you only notice you've crossed it when you look back and realise you're not sure how you got here. Still, the fog is warm. The fog is gentle. The fog is quiet. And in a world filled with noise, maybe quiet is enough for now. Your magazine arrives with pages of glossy ads, attractive women smiling with dead-eyed serenity, husbands looking grateful, slogans promising peace in pill form. You close it wondering if you're supposed to buy pills or buy the dream. The 1950s advertising engine doesn't merely suggest products. It invades your living room like a cheerful door-to-door salesman who refuses to leave until you've purchased something you didn't know existed. And when it finds Miltown, it treats it not like a medication, but like a lifestyle brand. The ads don't show stressed people collapsing under the weight of reality. They show blissed-out suburbanites who look like they couldn't identify stress if it tapped them on the shoulder and asked for directions. Every glossy page is a little universe of emotional manipulation. One ad shows a housewife lounging on her immaculate sofa, her hair curled, her lipstick perfect, her eyes glazed with a serenity bordering on supernatural. The copy reads something like, "When life demands perfection, Miltown helps you provide it." You stare at this image, wondering how she's maintaining that pose without dislocating a shoulder. Then there are the husband-focused ads. Smiling men in pressed suits gaze lovingly at their wives who are clearly sedated, but in a very glamorous way. The underlying message is simple. A calm wife makes a happy home. And perhaps, quietly whispered in the margins, a calm husband is less likely to yell at the lawnmower or develop ulcers before age 40. These ads don't just sell pills, they sell relief from the crushing expectations of the era. They whisper, you don't have to feel overwhelmed. You can buy calmness. You can purchase emotional stability in a bottle the size of your thumb. It's brilliant in a morally questionable sort of way. They've turned stress into a marketing opportunity. The imagery is always the same. Smooth lines, bright colours, perfect homes, perfect families, perfect social gatherings where no one raises their voice or their eyebrows. The world inside those magazines is sterile, aspirational, and absolutely unattainable without chemical help. Which, of course, is the point. You begin to notice Miltown everywhere, not just in your home, but across the cultural landscape. Radio jingles subtly mentioned it. TV hosts praised it between cigarette commercials. Newspapers printed glowing endorsements from doctors whose medical neutrality had been gently swayed by a generous lunch with a pharmaceutical rep. Pharmaceutical companies saw the rising tide of suburban anxiety and thought, fantastic, let's monetize that. They poured money into ad campaigns that made Miltown look like the emotional equivalent of a new refrigerator, sleek, modern, and essential to the American dream. They didn't just market the drug, they marketed a fantasy in which life's sharp edges no longer existed. A fantasy where you could glide through your day, unbothered by screaming kids, financial panic, or existential dread. You start analysing the ads more closely. The women all pose with their hands delicately placed on their cheeks, like they're caressing invisible clouds. The men lean back in armchairs with the languid expression of someone who's never once paid a bill on time. Everyone looks calm in a way that feels suspiciously choreographed. And beneath it all hums the soft, insistent message. If you're not blissful, you're doing life wrong. It's a brilliant trap. You buy the pills not because you're weak, but because the ads tell you that modern individuals use science to cope. They tell you that emotions are optional, that stress is uncivilized, that calm is the new status symbol. Owning Tupperware shows you can host a party. Owning Miltown shows you can survive one. Closing the magazine, you sit back and let the absurdity sink in. You're not just being sold a medication, you're being sold a personality. A perfectly serene, endlessly pleasant, emotionally stabilized version of yourself. And the wildest part, a small piece of you wants it. Because in a suburban world built on impossible expectations, the idea of buying peace feels like the most American thing you can do. Your children run around like caffeinated ferrets, but somehow you are unbothered. A glass breaks, a shoe is thrown. You blink slowly and say, "Please stop," like a Buddhist monk trapped in suburbia. Motherhood in the 1950s is not for the faint of heart. Before kids, you imagined peaceful breakfasts, tidy bedrooms, and quiet afternoons filled with crafts and educational activities. Instead, your days resemble a slapstick comedy performed at maximum volume by tiny untrained actors who refuse to take notes. They burst through rooms with the energy of windstorms, leaving a trail of broken crayons, melted ice cream, and questionable decisions in their wake. Before Miltown, these moments tested the limits of your sanity. Every shriek felt like a fire alarm. Every sibling fight felt like a lawsuit waiting to happen. You had a reflexive twitch in your left eye. You counted to 10 so often you nearly sprained a vocal cord. You fantasized, just briefly, about running away to a quiet cabin in the mountains where no one under 4 feet tall could follow you. But now you float through the chaos like a serene ghost haunting your own home. The children's screams feel more like background music. The spilled milk on the floor looks like an abstract art piece. Everything they do seems to happen from a comfortable distance, as though you're watching someone else's children misbehave in a department store. They climb onto the sofa and leap off with joy. You admire their bravery. They argue over a toy truck with the ferocity of medieval warriors. You admire their commitment. They ask for snacks every 11 minutes. You admire their metabolism. You no longer feel personally endangered by their existence. Your responses become delightfully slow and measured. Please use your indoor voices, you say, even when they are screaming at a decibel level capable of confusing migrating birds. Let's not throw blocks at your sister's head, you murmur, as though you're guiding a meditation class. Sweetheart, crayons are not for eating, you whisper, and your voice is so calm it could dissolve conflict in a war zone. The children, confused but intrigued, begin adjusting to this new version of you. They poke your arm occasionally, checking for signs of the mother who used to flinch at every loud noise. When they see you remain unshaken, they start treating you like a soft mountain they can climb, comforting, sturdy, immovable. There's a moment every afternoon, usually around 3 o'clock when the house briefly goes still. The kids collapse into a pile of toys and snacks, worn out by their own enthusiasm. You sit nearby sipping lukewarm coffee, feeling like a wise elder who has achieved enlightenment through pharmaceuticals. It's peaceful, in a surreal sort of way. You look at them and think, this is fine. Everything is fine. I am fine. Whether or not that's objectively true is irrelevant. The feeling is enough. Of course, Miltown doesn't erase motherhood's challenges. You still deal with tantrums, endless laundry, and a kitchen that never stays clean for longer than 6 minutes. You still negotiate peace treaties between siblings. You still perform the nightly ritual of getting them into pajamas, a process that would exhaust a Navy SEAL. But the emotional stakes are lower. The urgency is gone. It's like being wrapped in a padded emotional jacket. And strangely, this new calm has its perks. The kids start fighting a little less. They test boundaries a little less aggressively. Children can sense tension like dogs detect storms, and now that yours has evaporated, they mellow slightly too. Slightly. At bedtime, when you tuck them in, they look at you with suspicion, as though trying to decipher the mystery of your newfound tranquility. But then they snuggle into you. resting their heads on your shoulder with a softness that makes your heart ache in slow motion. And in that moment, you feel something warm under the fog, a little pocket of real tenderness. You kiss their foreheads and whisper good night, feeling peaceful, patient, and profoundly unbothered. Motherhood hasn't changed, but you've discovered the quiet superpower of chemically assisted composure. Your neighbour casually mentions she's taking Miltown now. You nod knowingly, both of you sharing the unspoken Suburban pact. If you can't fix your life, at least you can stay calm about it. In the 1950s, suburbia isn't just a place, it's a stage. A sprawling, pastel-coloured performance where everyone has a role. The perfect wife, the respectable husband, the cheerful children, the obedient dog that never actually exists in real life. And somewhere along the line, Miltown becomes part of the costume. A little invisible accessory that keeps the seams from splitting during the third act. Social gatherings take on a new dimension once tranquilizers enter the picture. Conversations feel lighter, less defensive, as though everyone collectively agreed to place their emotional baggage in storage for the afternoon. When someone mentions stress, it's in a breezy tone, as if stress is a charming houseguest rather than a chronic life condition. And whenever the topic of coping comes up, there's a subtle dance of coded language. Sleeping better lately, not as tense, just feeling more balanced. These are all suburban dialect for yes, I'm on Miltown too. Please join me in the quiet fog. Keeping up appearances was already difficult before tranquilizers. You had to juggle spotless homes, presentable children, a marriage that looked sturdy from the outside, and a social schedule that rivaled a diplomat's. But now emotional stability itself becomes a form of competition. It's not enough to keep your floors clean. You must also keep your mind visibly dust-free. You must look serene, sound serene, and emit the kind of calmness usually reserved for people who live in monasteries or have never seen a utility bill. Your neighbour Helen stops by one afternoon with a tray of muffins, so dense they could double as home defence tools. She leans in conspiratorially and says she's been feeling so refreshed lately. You both know what she means. Helen hasn't felt refreshed since the Roosevelt administration. Another friend mentions she's much less bothered by little things. Little things, in this case, include her husband, her children, her job, her responsibilities, and the existential dread of living through the Cold War. Everyone is soothing themselves, whether they admit it or not. It becomes a quiet hierarchy. Those who cope naturally, suspicious. Those who cope with caffeine, relatable. And those who cope with Miltown, the new suburban aristocracy. Being calm isn't just a personal goal anymore, it's a social asset. At parties, women compare recipes while subtly assessing who looks the most emotionally collected. Men stand around the grill, flipping hamburgers with the practiced, tranquil rhythm of people who have chemically retired from caring. No one gets too heated during political conversations. No one storms off during charades. Even the children sense the shift and tantrum half-heartedly, as if the air has become too mellow for full-scale meltdowns. Your neighbourhood starts to seem like a diorama of emotional composure. The Joneses next door rarely argue anymore. The Petersons' children stopped locking each other outside. Even the Hendersons' notoriously loud dog now barks with a gentler, more contemplative tone. It's as if Miltown has picked up a megaphone and declared, "Let there be calm," and everyone obediently nodded. And beneath it all lies the quiet truth. Your appearances are holding you hostage. You can't look overwhelmed, not in a world that prizes tranquility as the highest virtue. Your smile must stay steady. Your voice must stay level. Your nerves must stay buried under layers of mid-century modern self-control. But here's the twist Miltown adds to the story. You start enjoying the act. Playing the part of the serene housewife becomes easier. The mask isn't heavy anymore. You don't feel like you're pretending, you feel like you're floating. The expectations haven't changed, but your reaction to them has softened, dulled, and smoothed into something resembling acceptance. Keeping up appearances used to feel like a sport. Now it feels like gliding across a polished floor, arms outstretched, stress slipping off you like water on wax. And in a neighbourhood built on perfection, nothing is more valuable than appearing perfectly calm. Your husband sits in a fluorescent-lit office with an ashtray overflowing and a boss whose veins pulse visibly. Half the men in the room are on Miltown, and productivity rises only because nobody has the energy to argue anymore. The corporate world of the 1950s is its own ecosystem, part battleground, part smoke chamber, part emotional pressure cooker disguised as professionalism. Your husband's office is a vast sea of desks, each one occupied by a man in a nearly identical grey suit, staring at paperwork like it personally insulted him. The fluorescent lights hum overhead with the relentless persistence of something plotting against them. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, stale coffee, and the collective sigh of men quietly reconsidering every decision that led them here. Before Miltown, this place was chaos. Not obvious chaos, controlled chaos. The kind corporations like to pretend is teamwork. Men bickered over memos. Tempers flared at meetings. Someone might slam a drawer. Someone else might mutter that they're this close to quitting for the 47th time that week. Even the typewriters seemed angry, clacking furiously like tiny machines filing complaints. Then Miltown entered the corporate bloodstream. Now the office resembles a library where everyone is suspiciously calm. Arguments evaporate, disagreements flatten. Meetings, once gladiatorial, become strangely civil. A man says something wildly incorrect, and instead of being corrected, everyone simply nods, because disagreeing requires a level of emotional effort no one has access to anymore. Your husband sits at his desk, filling out forms in slow, steady loops. His handwriting suddenly calmer than his personality has ever been. The co-worker beside him, usually a ball of anxiety and suspenders, now stares peacefully at the wall like a monk contemplating the mysteries of file organisation. Even the office gossip, a man who once thrived on emotional chaos the way plants thrive on sunlight, now whispers his rumours with soothing gentleness, as if reading bedtime stories about corporate scandals. Their boss, however, is not sedated. He storms around the office with the energy of a man who only consumes coffee and rage, veins protruding like aggressive punctuation marks. He shouts deadlines, insults, and demands for higher productivity, all while the tranquilized workforce listens politely, nodding as if he's discussing the weather. This terrifies him. He's used to resistance, pushback, tiny rebellions. Now his employees look at him with mild curiosity, like they're observing a zoo animal on a sugar rush. His fury bounces off them harmlessly. It's hard to dominate people who no longer care enough to be dominated. He ramps up his campaign of yelling, but it's like screaming into a pillow. Meanwhile, productivity technically improves, not because anyone is working harder, but because the absence of arguments, panic attacks, and dramatic coffee spills creates a steady, uninterrupted flow of mildly competent labour. No one is exceptional, but no one is combusting either. Lunch breaks also transform. Once heated debates about sports, politics, or whose wife makes the driest meatloaf, lunch now consists of men eating sandwiches in mellow silence, occasionally commenting on the weather with philosophical detachment. Someone asks, "Is this ham or turkey?" No one knows, and more importantly, no one cares. Even the office pranks disappear. No one hides staplers. No one replaces sugar with salt. One man tries to be mischievous by moving someone's pencil cup a few inches to the left, but the victim simply shrugs and says, "That's fine." It kills the prankster's spirit completely. Your husband comes home calmer too. Not cheerful, not thrilled, just steady. like a man who has accepted that capitalism is an unavoidable fever dream he is choosing to float through rather than fight. He no longer rants about incompetent co-workers or unreasonable deadlines. Instead, he says things like, "Work was work," which, for a mid-century man, is basically a haiku about emotional growth. And this is how Miltown quietly remakes the corporate jungle. Not by curing stress, but by lowering the volume of it until the entire office becomes a softly humming terrarium of sedated ambition. The deadlines stay, the pressure stays, the fluorescent lights stay, but the men, they remain calm, or calmish, and in the 1950s corporate world that's practically enlightenment. You reach for a drink and pause. The pills are right next to the gin. The 1950s were a lawless time for the liver. Evenings in mid-century America follow a predictable rhythm. Dinner is served promptly at 6, dessert arrives at 6:30, and by 6:31 someone is pouring a drink. It's not about celebration, it's triage. Between the stress of the workday, the chaos of raising children, and the existential dread humming quietly beneath the music of the era, alcohol becomes everyone's favourite amateur therapist. The cocktail cabinet stands proudly in the corner of your dining room, a shrine to mid-century optimism and adult coping mechanisms. Crystal decanters glimmer, glassware clinks, cocktail shakers rest like metallic promises, and now nestled discreetly among the bottles is a new addition, Miltown, your household's unofficial emotional garnish. It's become a habit, opening the cabinet and seeing the pill bottle right there, standing tall beside the gin and vermouth as if it's always belonged in the lineup. It looks almost festive. A tiny container of calmness, ready to complement whatever terrible day you've had. Somewhere, a doctor would cringe. But he's probably also smoking indoors and mixing his own Miltown with scotch, so who is he to judge? Your husband starts experimenting with combinations, unintentionally inventing cocktails that would make a modern bartender faint. A Miltown martini, a tranquilizer twist, a gin and bear it. He thinks he's a mixologist now, charmingly unaware that his creations are less craft cocktail and more pharmaceutical roulette. But you don't correct him. Who has the energy to correct anyone anymore? Friends come over for dinner parties and pretend not to notice the pill bottle on display. But they notice. Oh, they definitely notice. Their eyes linger a moment too long, and then, casually, softly, they ask, "So does it actually help?" You exchange knowing looks, the adult equivalent of sharing a forbidden secret. Next week, their cocktail cabinets will look suspiciously similar. This is the era where every stress has a liquid or chemical solution. The lines between recreation and medication blur so thoroughly they might as well be smudged with lipstick. People spike their afternoon coffee with whiskey, chase their evening cocktails with tranquilizers, and sprinkle their emotional vulnerabilities with dustings of denial. If self-care in the 2020s is bubble baths and aromatherapy, self-care in the 1950s is very bravely pretending your liver is immortal. As you mix yourself a drink, you notice how the routine has changed. It used to be that a cocktail took the edge off. Now, the edge barely exists. It's been chemically wrapped in a soft cushion, tucked into bed, and kissed goodnight. Yet still, you pour the drink, maybe out of habit, maybe out of tradition, maybe out of the subtle, unspoken understanding that combining sedation with gin is the suburban equivalent of yelling into a pillow. You sit down in the living room and the ice clinks against the glass, a crisp sound cutting through the foggy quiet. You feel your shoulders sink, your breath slow, your mind drifting into that familiar mellow space where every thought becomes optional. The combination of alcohol and tranquilizers creates a tranquil twilight zone between consciousness and apathy. Not dangerous yet, but definitely irresponsible in a charmingly nostalgic way. And the wildest part? You're not alone. Across the country, thousands of households are unwittingly participating in this grand experiment of domestic chemistry. Women hosting bridge nights with cocktails and pills. Men unwinding after work with a cigarette, a drink, and the faint hope of feeling nothing for a few precious minutes. It's communal escapism with excellent glassware. By the time the drink is finished, you're not sure whether you're relaxed because of the gin, the Miltown, or sheer emotional surrender. The source doesn't matter. The result is the same. The evening floats by in gentle, numbing waves. Conversations become softer. Tensions dissolve into the upholstery. Even the sound of your kids arguing upstairs seems like abstract percussion. You stand, stretch, and place the empty glass in the sink. Tomorrow you'll pretend you live in a world where alcohol and tranquilizers shouldn't mix. But tonight you're honouring the great mid-century tradition of coping creatively. After all, what is the 1950s if not one long, elaborate cocktail hour with emotional garnish? You start noticing things. Drowsiness, forgetfulness, that constant feeling like you're 5 minutes behind your own life. But the alternative, raw, unfiltered stress, feels worse. At first, these side effects are subtle, almost charming. You forget where you put your keys, not unusual, but now you forget while holding them. You'll walk into a room and stand there, blinking slowly, trying to remember why you exist. Conversations float gently past you, and you catch phrases like school meeting or burnt roast, but your brain files them under deal with later, and then promptly loses the folder. There's a foggy softness to everything, like your life has been wrapped in gauze. Tasks that used to feel urgent, paying bills, ironing shirts, preventing your children from dismantling the furniture, now seem more like suggestions. You detach from the velocity of daily chaos, drifting a little behind the speed of reality. People talk, you nod. They ask questions, you nod again. Eventually they stop expecting responses and simply accept that you've become a polite blinking houseplant. You can tell your reflexes have slowed too. When someone drops a fork at dinner, you watch it fall with unhurried curiosity, as if gravity is a delightful surprise every time. Your husband asks if you're tired. You say, always, with a serene smile that unnerves him more than actual exhaustion ever did. But here's the strange thing. Even as you float through life like a slightly delayed radio broadcast, you also feel shielded. The stress that once gnawed at you, the worry, the guilt, the constant sense of doing everything wrong now feels like a distant memory. You barely remember what it felt like to panic. Emotional avalanches become gentle slopes. Arguments lose their heat. Parenting feels like guiding a mildly chaotic art project rather than taming wild beasts. Still, the side effects multiply. You begin losing track of time. Tasks blur together. Morning dissolves into afternoon without warning. Sometimes you look at the clock and wonder if it's broken, because surely it hasn't been 3 hours since you sat down to tie your shoes. Other days, time slips through your fingers like sand, soft, steady, impossible to hold. Your memory? A coin toss. You remember birthdays from your childhood, but not where you parked the car 30 minutes ago. You remember the name of your 7th grade teacher, but forget to turn off the stove. You start writing grocery lists not to remember what to buy, but to remember that you meant to buy things at all. Social side effects appear too. At gatherings, you find yourself smiling vaguely, while other women talk about stress, recipes, or their husband's questionable behaviour. You're present, but only technically. Your responses come a few beats late, like you're dubbed in a foreign film. People start speaking more slowly to you, not unkindly, just with the gentle caution one uses around a sleepy cat. And yes, the drowsiness. It settles into your bones like a warm blanket you never asked for. Your eyelids grow heavy during the most mundane tasks. Folding laundry, reading labels, parenting. Especially parenting. You could nap standing upright if someone leaned you against a sturdy enough wall. But even as these effects stack up, you cling to Miltown with the tender desperation of someone who knows exactly what the alternative feels like. Anxiety is exhausting. Fear is exhausting. The constant ache of responsibility is exhausting. So if the price of peace is that you lag slightly behind your own life, well, that feels like a fair trade. And here's the part no one says out loud. Mild sedation is easier than being overwhelmed. It's easier than crying while making dinner. It's easier than arguing with your husband about the lawn. It's easier than lying awake at night worrying about everything from bills to global politics to whether your roast is too dry. So you accept the side effects. You let your mind move gently, slowly, like a river in no hurry. You accept that clarity is a luxury. Sharpness is optional. Hyper-awareness is a burden. In the tranquil fog of Miltown, life doesn't get better. It just gets quieter. And honestly, sometimes quiet is all you can handle. Your doctor tells you your body's adjusting. You translate that to take more, which he seems perfectly comfortable allowing. At first, Miltown felt like magic. One tiny tablet could turn panic into patience, chaos into background noise, and your long list of responsibilities into something that felt merely mildly inconvenient. But now the pill feels a little weaker, like it's lost some of its sparkle. The same dose that once made the world feel like a soft-focus soap commercial has begun to feel normal, regular, barely enough to take the sting out of a spilled pot roast. You tell this to your doctor, the same man who once prescribed Miltown with the enthusiasm of a game show host giving away a new car, and he assures you this is perfectly natural. Your system is adjusting, he says, while smoking indoors and flipping through a medical chart that may or may not be yours. He offers the solution with a shrug so casual it could qualify as negligence. Just take another, so you do. At first, increasing the dose works. That familiar soft haze returns, smoothing the sharp corners of your day. But soon, a new pattern develops. Stress rises. The pill blocks it. Stress rises again. The pill steps aside, sighs, and lets some of it through. Your tolerance grows like a stubborn weed in the garden, quietly, steadily, impossible to ignore. You start noticing subtle signs. The pill bottle empties faster. The pharmacy clerk recognizes you on sight. You begin planning your day around when you take your next tablet, timing the peaks and dips like someone managing a very delicate hot air balloon. Some days, the pill barely moves the needle. You find yourself staring at your to-do list, laundry, bills, groceries, and feeling only slightly less overwhelmed than before. On other days, the pill seems too effective, sending you into a dreamy fog where you forget not only your stress, but also your grocery list, your neighbour's name, and whether you ever turned off the iron. Then comes the creeping fear. What if the calm is no longer optional? What if, without Miltown, the real world, the loud, sharp, demanding world, rushes back in like a tidal wave? You test it once. You skip a pill. Just one. Within hours, your nerves begin buzzing like live wires. The kids' voices sound too loud. Your husband's questions feel too pointed. The mail arriving at the door startles you so badly you nearly spill your coffee. It's like watching your emotional foundation slough off in real time. You take a pill immediately, whispering to the bottle like it's a trusted friend who briefly betrayed you. Dependence doesn't announce itself dramatically. It slinks in quietly, disguised as routine. Soon the idea of facing life without a pill becomes as unthinkable as facing life without electricity. You crave the calm not because it feels amazing, but because the alternative feels unbearable, and the culture around you reinforces it. Your friends casually mention that they needed an extra one today. Your neighbour jokes about her growing tolerance. The men at the office carry pills in their jacket pockets like breath mints. It's not addiction, not officially, not in polite society, but it's something close, something adjacent, something uncomfortably familiar. Your doctor, meanwhile, remains unfazed. He refills your prescription with the disinterest of someone signing autographs. He warns vaguely about overuse, but his tone suggests he's required to say it, not that he cares. Medicine, in his mind, is a numbers game. If one works, two might work better, and three will probably get the job done. As the months pass, you find yourself building a quiet dependency ecosystem. Pill bottles in your purse, pill bottles in the kitchen, a secret reserve tucked behind the flour jar. You tell yourself it's practical preparation, not desperation, and you almost believe it. But underneath the tranquility, beneath the fog and the numbness and the soft emotional padding, lives a subtle truth. You don't feel more stable, you just feel less aware, and the line between those two states gets blurrier every day. Your pharmacist beams when restocking Miltown. He might as well roll out a red carpet for the delivery truck. Money rains, pills pour. Something shifts in the air when Miltown becomes a national obsession. It's not subtle, it's not slow, it's a cultural gold rush with better suits and fewer pickaxes. Pharmaceutical companies don't just take notice, they pounce. If suburbia is drowning in stress, Big Pharma shows up like a grinning lifeguard holding a flotation device made of pure profit. Your local pharmacy becomes ground zero for the tranquilizer boom. The display shelves expand. New signage appears bright and hopeful. Ask your doctor about relief. The pharmacist, normally a man who rarely emotes beyond mild irritation, suddenly radiates cheerfulness. He restocks Miltown with the enthusiasm of someone hand-delivering miracles. Each bottle he places on the shelf looks like a tiny bar of gold. Honestly, he looks like he wants to hug them. Behind the counter, he fields questions from curious mothers, exhausted fathers, and anyone who has been alive more than 10 minutes. Does it really work? How many can I take? Is it safe with alcohol? The answers, yes, yes, and technically no, but culturally yes, come out rehearsed, soothing, and deeply profitable. Pharmaceutical reps start making the rounds. These men are always impeccably dressed, smelling faintly of cologne and ambition. They stride into doctors' offices carrying briefcases filled with samples, pamphlets, promotional pens, and the quiet confidence of people who know they're about to supercharge their quarterly bonuses. They speak in glowing terms: revolutionary, breakthrough, scientifically proven, all without blinking. Doctors who are still smoking indoors and barely washing their hands between patients nod gravely while thinking about the steak dinner the rep is offering later. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. The rep gets prescriptions written, the doctor gets free merchandise and social validation, and the patients get well, increasingly sedated. By mid-decade, Miltown isn't just a pill. It's a phenomenon. Newspapers run stories about it. Magazines print glowing testimonials. Hollywood stars hint that they take it. Even the stock market swoons over pharmaceutical companies, watching their profits balloon like overinflated parade floats. Investors throw money at anything resembling a tranquilizer. If a company sneezes in the direction of a sedative, its value goes up. America, it seems, has discovered emotional outsourcing. Pharmaceutical companies respond by pushing production into overdrive. Factories hum day and night, churning out tablets with mechanical precision. Marketing teams work tirelessly to expand the consumer base. Why should housewives have all the fun? Why not target exhausted office workers, overwhelmed parents, mildly stressed veterans, anyone with a pulse? The ads broaden, the slogans sharpen, the messaging becomes unavoidable. A peaceful life is within reach. Rediscover joy. Don't let stress win. It's not just selling a drug, it's selling an identity, a fantasy, a chemically enhanced version of the American dream. You begin noticing subtle changes around town. The pharmacy parking lot is always full. The druggist gets a shiny new car. His wife suddenly begins wearing nicer jewellery. She smiles more. Maybe from financial security, maybe from free samples. Hard to say. Even your doctor upgrades his office furniture, replacing his worn-out chair with something that looks suspiciously expensive. Meanwhile, Miltown's popularity grows so rapidly that people start joking about it. Are you on it? Becomes as common a question as how's the family. Cocktail parties include whispered conversations about dosage. Bridge nights include pill trading like it's a friendly neighbourhood swap meet. Even the clergy get in on the trend, quietly, discreetly, after particularly long confession sessions. Behind the humour, though, is the undeniable truth. Everyone is buying into the gold rush because everyone is struggling. The world is changing faster than people can emotionally keep up. And pharmaceutical companies know it. They smell the anxiety in the air the way sharks smell blood in water. But instead of circling, they package the solution, print a label, add a cheerful slogan, and roll out the pill carts. You watch your pharmacist stock another row of bottles, his smile wide and hopeful. For him, this isn't a medical revolution, it's business, and business has never looked calmer. Headlines begin popping up. Is America over-medicated? Are housewives too calm? You read them calmly while taking another tablet. It starts innocently enough. A small column on page 12 of the newspaper, tucked between an ad for vacuum cleaners and a cartoon about marital miscommunication. But soon, the tone shifts. Reports multiply. Articles grow bolder. Journalists begin circling Miltown like pigeons who've noticed a new crumb on the pavement. What was once a miracle pill, the darling of suburban homes and doctors' offices, suddenly becomes a subject of national concern. You sip your morning coffee, tablet dissolving under your tongue, while reading an expose warning that America might be dulling its emotional edge. The writer uses words like epidemic and dependence, but their alarm barely registers. You blink slowly, turn the page, and move on to the comics. Soon, the headlines grow more dramatic. Tranquilizer Nation, the pill-making Americans too happy. Is calm killing our spirit? Print media, sensing an opportunity for moral panic, and perhaps a boost in sales, dives headfirst into the narrative. Pictures of perfectly coiffed housewives accompany the articles, all wearing the same serene expression the journalists now describe as concerningly vacant. You look at their faces and think, oh, I have that face. The articles usually follow the same structure. Paragraph 1, alarm. Paragraph 2, vague scientific explanations involving the word nerves. Paragraph 3, an interview with a doctor who smokes through the entire conversation while insisting everything is completely fine. Paragraph 4, a cautionary statement urging Americans to stay vigilant. Paragraph 5, an ad for Miltown on the opposite page. It's hard to take any of it seriously. Still, the press continues escalating. Magazines publish lengthy think pieces describing the tranquilizer boom as a silent cultural revolution, suggesting that widespread calm may be eroding America's ambitious spirit. You find this funny because nothing about raising children, vacuuming carpets, or hosting PTA meetings feels even remotely ambitious. If anything, the pill merely keeps you from screaming into a casserole dish. Daytime talk shows chime in too. Hostesses clutch pearls while interviewing experts who warn that society is on the brink of emotional collapse. Guests tell sensational stories about neighbours who became too agreeable or husbands who stopped shouting during football games. The horror! Politicians begin making speeches about returning to traditional values, which seems ironic considering half of them are rumoured to be taking Miltown themselves. Your husband listens to one of these speeches on the radio, nodding thoughtfully as he pockets his tablet for later. Then come the local news segments, which are somehow worse. There's always a reporter standing in front of a tidy suburban street, warning viewers that your neighbour could be tranquilized right now. You look out your window at Mrs. Peterson trimming her roses with suspicious serenity and think, yes, obviously. But despite the frenzy, nothing changes. Not really. The articles may scold and the reporters may panic. But life continues with its usual pressures. Laundry doesn't fold itself. Husbands still grumble about bills, and children still treat the house like a personal racetrack. The only difference is that now you feel gently insulated from the noise. Every time the press tries to spark fear, America collectively shrugs. Because deep down, everyone knows the truth. Miltown didn't appear in a vacuum. It arrived in a decade bubbling with tension, nuclear anxiety, social conformity, rising consumerism, impossible expectations, and offered a lifeline. Maybe not a perfect one, maybe not a healthy one, but a lifeline nonetheless. If the media wants you to feel guilty for taking the edge off, they'll have to try harder. Stress isn't glamorous, panic isn't patriotic, and if calmness is a problem for the national spirit, well, perhaps the national spirit should try being a mother of 3 during the Cold War without chemical assistance. You turn another page and find yet another article about the dangerous rise of tranquilizer use. You read it steadily, unbothered. Then you take your tablet, just to make sure you stay calm about it. Your favourite movie stars are taking it too. Interviews describe them as mellow and floating through their schedules like gentle clouds. You wonder where they get the stronger doses. Hollywood in the 1950s is a glittering machine powered by glamour, grueling schedules, and a stunning amount of emotional suppression. Beneath the sequins and studio lights, actors are juggling impossible expectations. Always look perfect, always be charming, always pretend you're not exhausted from filming 10 hours a day under lamps that could roast a Thanksgiving turkey. So when Miltown arrives in suburbia, Hollywood doesn't just adopt it, it embraces it with open, slightly trembling arms. Suddenly, magazine covers feature your favourite stars lounging elegantly, looking not just relaxed but professionally tranquilized. The captions gush over how calm they seem, how radiant, how fresh-faced after months of intense filming. You squint at the photos, recognizing the same hazy expression you see in your own mirror after a pill and a cup of coffee. Interviews become unintentionally hilarious. Stars smile dreamily and answer tough questions with gentle half-thoughts. How do you deal with stress on set? Oh, pillows and breathing. No one mentions the obvious elephant in the room, an elephant wearing sunglasses, lying on a chaise lounge and softly humming because it accidentally took 2 tablets instead of 1. Hollywood publicists, sensing a powerful marketing angle, describe Miltown as part of a modern wellness routine. Stars begin casually referencing it alongside cold cream and beauty sleep. A lady must care for her nerves, one actress says in Life magazine, sounding like a Victorian ghost who shops at Saks Fifth Avenue. Of course, the studios love it. A calm, compliant actor is a producer's dream. No tantrums, no walkouts, no dramatic fainting spells during costume fittings. Directors report shorter days because nobody argues anymore. Screenwriters claim their scripts sound funnier when mildly sedated. Even gaffers swear the lighting rigs look more symmetrical. Soon, Miltown becomes a quiet badge of belonging in the entertainment industry. Parties in the Hollywood Hills feature cocktails, cigarettes, and the soft rattle of pill bottles passed around like hors d'oeuvres. There's always that one producer who says, "These are doctor prescribed," while handing them out like candy corn. You notice how this Hollywood calm trickles down into everyday life. Glamour magazines publish articles like How to Stay Serene Like a Starlet, which mostly involves drinking cucumber water, getting 8 hours of sleep, impossible, and taking Miltown, very possible. You follow these routines with mixed success. though your cucumber water usually ends up being tap water poured into a fancy glass because the cucumbers are always past their prime when you remember them. And then there are the rumours. Whispered stories about certain A-list actors who get special batches of Miltown, stronger than anything available at your corner pharmacy. You picture them floating through the studio lot like peaceful ghosts, accidentally walking into the wrong soundstage and not caring at all. You can't help but wonder what life would be like if your dosage matched theirs. Would you glide through your daily chores with cinematic elegance? Would the neighbourhood gossip sound like violin music instead of doom? Would your children appear as adorable slow-motion extras in a musical number instead of caffeinated chaos gremlins? Hollywood's influence is powerful, though not always logical. As celebrities normalise tranquility, the rest of the country follows. It becomes socially acceptable, chic even, to admit you take something to take the edge off. Your friends begin quoting movie stars in defence of their own prescriptions. "If it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me," Helen says while stirring sugar into her coffee with glassy-eyed tranquility. And in a strange, looping way, Hollywood and suburbia start mirroring each other. Stars take Miltown to survive the pressure of fame. Housewives take Miltown to survive the pressure of perfection. One world sparkles under spotlights, the other sparkles under fluorescent kitchen bulbs, but the fog of calm unites them in a shared experience of chemically assisted serenity. You lean back in your chair, flipping through a fan magazine filled with floaty, blissed-out celebrities. Their lives look perfect, effortless, serene. It's nice to imagine, for a moment, that yours could be too. You walk into the pharmacy and the clerk already has your refill ready because he saw your station wagon pull up. Customer service, 1950s style. There's something oddly comforting about how predictable the ritual has become. The bell above the door jingles as you enter, releasing you into a world of polished counters, soft lighting, and the faint medicinal smell of hope mixed with rubbing alcohol. The pharmacist glances up, smiles knowingly, and reaches beneath the counter before you can even say hello. He moves with the smooth confidence of someone who has completed this exact transaction hundreds of times and expects to complete it hundreds more. Your bottle of Miltown lands on the counter with a gentle thud, like a small pharmaceutical pat on the back. "Running a little early this month," the clerk remarks, but not judgmentally, more like he's complimenting your commitment to emotional maintenance. You laugh nervously and make up something about a stressful week, though both of you know exactly why you're here. He bags the prescription, folds the top neatly, and slides it toward you like a sacred offering. The pharmacy itself has become a second home. You know every aisle by heart. The makeup section where the lipstick colours are all subtly wrong for your skin tone. The greeting cards that range from aggressively cheerful to vaguely unsettling. The household section that sells everything from bandages to potato chips, as if those items naturally belong together. But the heart of it all is the prescription counter, humming with quiet efficiency and unspoken understanding. You begin noticing the regulars. Mrs. Whittaker, who always pretends she's buying cough syrup but darts a little too quickly to the pickup window. Mr. Burrow, who lingers awkwardly by the vitamins until the clerk waves him over for his refill. A young mother who looks perpetually tired enough to fall asleep standing up. The pharmacy becomes a sanctuary for the chronically overwhelmed, a place where no one questions your exhaustion, and everyone understands the importance of a small white pill. On certain afternoons, the pharmacy feels like a social club. You make polite conversation with strangers while waiting for your prescription, bonding over shared symptoms and shared solutions. Nerves, you say. Nerves, they agree. That one word is enough. In the 1950s, nerves are treated the way modern people treat Wi-Fi outages, with dramatic urgency and mutual empathy. The pharmacist, a man who looks like he hasn't taken a day off since the Truman administration, operates with the calm authority of someone who knows he's a pillar of the community. He greets everyone by name, remembers their ailments, and dispenses advice with the conviction of a guru. Take it with food, he says. Don't take two at once, he warns. But his tone suggests that if you did, he wouldn't be entirely surprised. Sometimes, when the store is busy, you watch the choreography unfold. Bottles rattling, papers sliding, pens scribbling dosage instructions. Everyone moves with purpose, yet the entire scene feels wrapped in a soft haze. Maybe it's the fluorescent lighting. Maybe it's the collective sedation of the customers. Maybe it's both. And then there's the unspoken etiquette. You don't talk about how often you're here. You don't ask other people why they're here. You don't mention how your hands sweat slightly every time you imagine running out of pills. No one judges anyone's frequency or dosage, or the desperation in their eyes when they ask if the refill came in early this month. Because everyone understands. Everyone is tired. Everyone is stretched thin. Everyone is quietly terrified of the daily avalanche of responsibilities disguised as normal life. So you clutch your paper bag and head back to your car, feeling a strange mix of relief and resignation. Relief that your inner calm has been restocked. Resignation that you'll be back again in a few weeks, performing this ritual like clockwork. As you drive away, you glance at the pharmacy in your rearview mirror, its glowing windows and steady traffic, a reminder that you are not alone in your pursuit of emotional stability. In this era, the pharmacy isn't just where you get medicine, it's where you get through the day. You and your spouse communicate better these days, not because anything has improved, but because neither of you has the emotional bandwidth to escalate into conflict. Marriage in the 1950s is a delicate ecosystem built on routines, unspoken expectations, and the occasional suppressed scream into a decorative throw pillow. Before Miltown, arguments were loud, dramatic affairs, miniature thunderstorms that gathered quickly and struck without warning. You'd snap about chores, he'd snap about expenses, you'd both snap about whose turn it was to take out the trash. Even minor disagreements could erupt into a saga worthy of a courtroom dramatization, but now everything is suspiciously calm. You sit across from each other at dinner like two diplomats who have agreed to a temporary ceasefire. The mashed potatoes are slightly lumpy. The roast is a little dry. Normally this would spark a passive-aggressive comment or at least a pointed sigh, but tonight you both blink at the food with serene indifference, as if culinary disappointment no longer applies to your species. Fights don't disappear, they simply lose energy. A disagreement starts, fizzles, and drifts off like a half-inflated balloon. "I thought you were going to fix the screen door, you say?" "I thought I did," he replies. You both stare at each other. In another era, sparks would fly. Today you shrug simultaneously and move on to discussing the weather. Your emotional reflexes are slow now, cushioned, softened. It's as if someone installed safety bumpers around every conversation. Neither of you has the stamina to escalate. Rage requires fuel, passion requires focus, and both of those feelings are currently floating somewhere above your heads, unreachable. And so, without ever meaning to, you and your husband slip into a gentle, sedated partnership. Not in a romantic way, more like two co-workers silently agreeing not to quit on the same day. Miltown becomes the invisible mediator in the relationship, smoothing communication the way icing smooths a slightly burnt cake. Weekends shift too. Before the pills, Saturdays meant chores punctuated by arguments. Lawn mowing, bill paying, child wrangling, appliance fixing, and the occasional cold war over whether you should repaint the kitchen. Now, Saturdays glide by with a soft, undemanding rhythm. You drift around the house doing things slowly but without complaint. He tinkers in the garage with the focus of someone who has forgotten what he was fixing, but isn't bothered by that fact. The children notice the change. They stop tiptoeing around your moods because your moods, well, aren't really showing up anymore. When they fight, you and your spouse intervene gently. as if narrating a documentary about small territorial mammals. "Let's use our words," you murmur. Yeah, guys use words. Your husband echoes from behind a newspaper he's not reading. Even intimacy changes. Not in dramatic ways, just in subtle, slow-motion ways. Instead of dramatic arguments followed by equally dramatic reconciliations, the two of you drift toward each other like warm clouds. The passion is softer, the connection gentler, the urgency gone. You don't feel distant. You simply feel padded. But underneath the calm lies a truth you both choose not to examine too closely. You aren't resolving anything. You're bypassing it. You're skipping the messy, uncomfortable emotional work in favor of a polite pharmaceutical detour. If marriage is a long road, you're cruising through it in the slow lane with the windows rolled down and the map upside down. Therapy isn't an option, not culturally, not socially, not in a decade where feelings are considered hazardous materials. Couples don't talk about communication tools or emotional wounds or deep-rooted patterns. They talk about yard maintenance, sales at the grocery store, and the neighbour's new hedge trimmer. And now, in homes across America, they talk about none of those things with a newfound tranquility that borders on comical. But here's the quiet miracle. For the first time in a long time, the house feels peaceful. No slammed doors, no muttered frustrations. Just two people floating side by side, navigating life on a soft chemical cushion. It's not perfect, it's not transformative, but it is calm. And in a marriage built on decades of noise, sometimes calm is enough to feel like love. Homework crises and tantrums no longer break you. Your children could set the living room on fire and you'd calmly ask them to use the good matches next time. Parenting was once a battlefield. Not metaphorically, literally. Every evening felt like fighting a small war armed only with a wooden spoon, a fraying patience, and the faint hope that bedtime would come before someone lost a limb. You remember the days when a spilled drink could push you to the brink of emotional collapse, and a simple homework assignment could spark an existential crisis. Long division, a nightmare, science projects, crimes against sanity, a diorama of the solar system, unaffordable, but now? Now parenting feels like drifting down a lazy river. Sure, the river occasionally catches fire, but the current is gentle and the flames are frankly quite pretty from a distance. Your children fight, of course. They're siblings. Fighting is their love language. Before Miltown, their arguments were piercing, like being stabbed with tiny high-pitched forks. Now their shrieks sound muffled, distant, almost musical, as if someone installed emotional insulation inside your ears. You intervene with the tone of a serene librarian gently reminding patrons not to set the fiction section on fire. "Please keep your hands to yourself," you say softly, even as one child wields a plastic sword and the other prepares to defend themselves with a metal lunchbox. The homework hour becomes a surreal experience. Once, the mere sight of a worksheet was enough to trigger a migraine. You used to hover anxiously, correcting pencil grips, re-explaining math problems, and silently panicking about your child's future education. Now you sit back, sip your lukewarm coffee, and murmur supportive noises that may or may not align with reality. Triangles, yes, very good. Math is shapes, you say, while your child confidently solves a problem upside down. When tantrums erupt, you no longer brace for impact. You simply observe them with anthropological curiosity. Your toddler thrashes on the floor like a fish auditioning for a nature documentary. You nod sympathetically. Big feelings, you whisper, as if narrating for the BBC. Eventually the tantrum ends, not because you intervened, but because the child becomes exhausted or bored. Either way, you remain calm, composed, and mildly entertained. Discipline takes on a new flavour, where once you handed out timeouts with military precision, you now adopt a more holistic approach, which is to say you sort of forget. Did I ground you? Or was that someone else? You ask one child who shrugs, unsure himself. You settle on a compromise. Let's both think about our behaviour, and the issue dissolves into the fog. Your patience becomes legendary. Neighbourhood parents marvel at your composure. How do you stay so calm, they ask, as your children reenact a Viking raid in the background. You smile and credit breathing exercises, which is only partly true. You do breathe, just more slowly now, much more slowly. Even bedtime transforms. You used to dread the nightly battle, complete with lost pyjamas, existential dread, and someone inevitably crying about a stuffed animal injustice. Now bedtime feels like guiding sleepy creatures toward their nests. The children still resist, of course. Children are constitutionally incapable of lying down willingly, but you remain unfazed. They tell you they're thirsty for the 10th time. You hand them water without emotional commentary. They ask deep philosophical questions about mortality or the moon. You respond with vague wisdom. Sleep will answer that. And when the house finally goes quiet, you don't collapse. You drift. You move through the living room picking up toys as if rearranging the set of a play you're only loosely familiar with. You fold blankets, turn off lamps, and admire the silence. Not because the day was easy, but because you don't feel the exhaustion in sharp edges anymore. Parenting hasn't gotten simpler. Children are still chaos with legs. They still test limits and break things and ask questions no adult is qualified to answer. But under the warm haze of tranquilizers, you experience it all from a gentle distance, as if you've been given backstage access to your own life. You're not detached, you're simply cushioned. And for a parent in the 1950s, cushioned is sometimes the closest thing to peace. A new pill appears on the horizon. Doctors whisper its name like it's a forbidden lover. Diazepam. Miltown feels suddenly old-fashioned, like last season's casserole. The shift is subtle at first. A rumour here, a magazine blurb there, a neighbour casually mentioning that her doctor is trying something new. You don't think much of it until one afternoon when your own doctor, a man who normally speaks with the enthusiasm of a soggy sponge, leans in conspiratorially and murmurs, "There's a new tranquilizer coming. Supposed to be smoother, stronger, more elegant. Elegant. A word usually reserved for evening gowns and fancy silverware, now being applied to a pill. You nod politely, even though you're not entirely sure how a chemical can be elegant unless it shows up wearing pearls. Soon, whispers turn into conversations. Conversations turn into excitement, and excitement becomes a quiet pharmaceutical frenzy. Valium arrives not with a bang, but with the seductive hum of a product launch orchestrated by people who know Americans adore a good upgrade. Miltown was the reliable family car. Valium is the sleek new convertible with shiny chrome and a tagline promising modern calm. Doctors embrace it instantly. They speak of it with reverence, puffing their cigarettes and extolling its virtues like poets describing a muse. More consistent, they say. Less groggy, they promise. Fast-acting, they brag, handing out sample bottles with the same wild generosity of a game show host giving away blenders. Your pharmacist begins reorganizing the shelves. Miltown gets nudged slightly to the left as if making room for royalty. The Valium display sparkles under the fluorescent lights, glowing like a beacon for the exhausted. You swear the pharmacist smiles more. He probably does. Business is about to boom in ways he can't even legally acknowledge. At home, you watch the cultural tides turn. Friends who once praised Miltown as their emotional lifeline now sound dismissive. "Oh, I still take it sometimes," Helen says, waving her hand like she's referring to an old ex she's outgrown. But Valium is different. Different how? She can't articulate it, but she doesn't need to. The glowing look in her eyes says enough. Your husband hears about it at work. The corporate jungle, always eager for anything that dulls the agony of fluorescent lighting and authoritarian bosses, welcomes Valium with open arms. Men begin carrying the blue tablets in their shirt pockets like lucky charms. The office becomes even quieter, if that's possible. Productivity rises not because anyone is working harder, but because no one cares enough to resist anymore. You can't help feeling a twinge of insecurity. Miltown has been your loyal companion through suburban fires, literal and emotional. It saw you through tantrums, PTA meetings, dinner disasters, and holidays with in-laws, and now it's being treated like an outdated appliance, a relic, a tranquilizer from a simpler time. But curiosity wins out when your doctor finally offers Valium with a little flourish, just to see how it works for you. You accept the sample. The tablets are tiny, smooth, promising. You stare at them for a long moment, feeling oddly disloyal, like you're cheating on a very boring spouse. When you finally take one, the effect is different. Quicker, silkier, less fog, more glide. You feel emotions slipping away effortlessly, like someone polished the rails of your nervous system. Even the children sense the change. Mum seems floatier, one whispers. Maybe she's a ghost now, the other replies. You smile at them, unbothered by the suggestion. And that's when you realise the era of Miltown is ending not with a dramatic crash, but with a gentle fade, ushered out by a more fashionable, more potent successor. The pill that once revolutionised American calm is now slipping quietly into cultural nostalgia. But you don't feel sad, not really. You're far too tranquil for that. Valium has arrived, and Miltown, well, it had a good run. Magazines pivot. Critics blame tranquilizers for everything from weak marriages to bland personalities. You look around your kitchen feeling mildly accused. The backlash doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, like a draft under the front door. One day the magazines are praising Miltown and Valium as the greatest invention since sliced bread. The next, they're issuing dire warnings about the epidemic of emotional softness. Headlines warn that America has become a nation of drifting clouds, and you wonder when clouds became a national security threat. Suddenly everyone's pointing fingers. Columnists write dramatic opinion pieces titled things like, "Is calm ruining the American spirit?" and "Can a sedated nation survive the space race?" You read these while sipping your morning coffee, feeling personally attacked by the implication that your emotional stability might be compromising national progress. You didn't know relaxation was unpatriotic. At first, you find it amusing. Critics lament that tranquilizers are destroying authentic human experience, as if authentic experience includes screaming at burnt meatloaf or dissolving into tears during PTA meetings. They claim the pills are numbing America's edge. You glance at the ironing board and wonder what edge they're talking about, because nothing in your life feels particularly sharp. But the guilt campaign gains momentum. Talk show hosts begin interviewing experts, some real, some suspiciously enthusiastic, who warn against pharmaceutical dependency. They gesture passionately, warning that pills are weakening marriages, flattening personalities, and possibly causing an existential crisis in the American psyche. Meanwhile, your children are reenacting a Roman battle in the living room, and you cannot for the life of you understand how feeling calm is the dangerous part. Then come the think pieces about motherhood. You can practically feel the judgment seeping off the page as cultural critics insist that a true mother faces her emotions head-on. You picture yourself confronting your emotions without chemical assistance, and decide that would be a safety hazard for everyone involved. The article claims the rise in tranquilizers indicates a decline in maternal fortitude, but you distinctly remember that your maternal fortitude was tested last week when your son tried to flush a toy soldier down the toilet. Men aren't spared either. Social commentators complain that tranquilizers are making husbands too agreeable, as if agreeable husbands are a national crisis. Newspapers accuse men of losing their competitive edge, which your husband reads while lying on the sofa in an unusually peaceful state. He shrugs at the accusation, turns the page and says, "Seems fine to me," which only proves the columnist's point. Still, the cultural tide grows louder. Clergy speak about moral decay by medication. Politicians subtly hint that America needs grit, real grit, not the kind that comes in a tablet. Radio hosts scold the nation for taking shortcuts to serenity. No one acknowledges that the shortcut is often the only path when you're expected to keep house, raise children, maintain a marriage, manage chores, and look radiant while doing all of it. You begin to notice the judgment in small places. A neighbour casually mentions she's cut back on her pills, tilting her chin up like she deserves a medal. Another woman at the PTA meeting says she's trying natural methods, while giving you a pitying smile usually reserved for lost animals. Even the pharmacist seems little more serious when handing you your refill, as if participating in something slightly scandalous. So you stand there in your kitchen, the epicenter of your daily battles, feeling lightly scolded by society at large. The kettle whistles, the refrigerator hums, the children scream upstairs. You take stock of your life, your nerves, your responsibilities, and your sanity. Then you take your pill, not dramatically, not defiantly, just calmly. Because while the critics debate the ethics of tranquility, nobody is volunteering to come babysit your kids or scrub your floors or mediate your marriage. Nobody is offering to take on the emotional labour currently weighing down your shoulders. You swallow your dose and lean against the counter, feeling the soft wave of calm move through you. Let the magazines panic. Let the critics complain. You have a life to survive, and surviving, in this decade, requires a little help. One day you stop taking it, maybe by choice, maybe because your doctor tries a new prescription. The world suddenly feels loud, bright, and extremely pointy again. It doesn't happen all at once. At first you simply forget a dose. You feel odd, a little sharper around the edges, like someone turned up the contrast on your thoughts. Colours seem brighter, sounds seem louder. Your children's footsteps sound like they're wearing tap shoes. The clinking of dishes feels like a percussion performance. Your own heartbeat sounds like it's trying to get your attention. Everything is dialed up to 12, and you're not sure whether to panic or applaud your nervous system for finally waking up. After a day or two, the fog lifts completely, and you realise something unsettling. Reality has texture. Texture you forgot about. There's a prickle behind your eyes that might be stress, or awareness, or both. You walk into the kitchen and notice for the first time in months that the counters are slightly sticky. Not metaphorically, actually sticky. This would have horrified you once. Now it merely confuses you. You stare at the sticky spot like it's a crime scene your sedated self never solved. The children seem louder too. Much louder. They speak in a decibel range previously inaudible to you. Their tantrums are symphonies. Their giggles are explosions. Their questions, endless, relentless, pierce through your skull with mathematical precision. Mum, where do spiders sleep? Mum, can ketchup expire? Mum, why do we have knees? Before, you would have answered these with serene detachment. Now you grip the counter and whisper, please, one at a time. Your husband notices the shift immediately. You seem stressed, he says, which is the married person's equivalent of poking a wild animal with a stick. You want to answer calmly, but you feel your voice vibrating like an overstrung violin. I'm fine, you insist, which is the universal code for I am absolutely not fine. At meals, flavours return. Unfortunately, so do opinions. The meatloaf tastes too salty. The carrots are too soft. Your husband chews too loudly. The refrigerator hums like it's angry with you personally. Even the air feels aggressive. You find yourself flinching at noises you once floated past effortlessly. And then comes the emotional ricochet. Feelings you haven't fully experienced in months, maybe years, come barreling back like passengers who missed their train and are now sprinting through the station. Irritation, sadness, anxiety, a surprising amount of rage. They all crowd in at once, shouting, "Remember us." You nod politely, sweating. You realise how much you relied on the pill, not just for calm, but for distance. Without it, life presses against you with full weight. The to-do list feels personal again. The bills glare at you. The laundry judges you. Even the wallpaper seems to whisper, "Get it together." And yet something else stirs underneath the panic. A thin spark of clarity. Your thoughts, while chaotic, feel more yours than they have in a long time. You notice details you forgot mattered. The way sunlight hits the kitchen table in the morning. The warmth in your child's smile. The tiny, wonderful, maddening imperfections of daily life. You feel emotions fully, not just the difficult ones, but the soft ones too. The transition is rough though. There's no sugarcoating it. Withdrawal isn't dramatic collapse. It's a slow, bewildering reacclimation to reality. You find yourself craving the old fog, the gentle haze that made everything look slightly out of focus. But you also sense somewhere deep beneath the noise that maybe the haze wasn't meant to last forever. You take it day by day, hour by hour. Some moments are hard. Others are surprisingly tender. You breathe more deliberately now, grounding yourself in a world that feels painfully sharp but undeniably alive. And slowly, very slowly, you begin to remember that life wasn't supposed to feel muted. It was supposed to feel real. Years later, you remember the Miltown era with a strange mix of nostalgia and nausea. It was the pill that tried to solve everything and created a new chapter in America's love affair with chemistry. Time adds a glossy filter to the past, smoothing out the rough edges, highlighting the absurdity, and leaving you wondering how you survived half the things you endured. When you look back on the 1950s, on the casseroles, the conformity, the cigarette smoke trapped inside every room, you can't help but marvel that tranquilizers weren't just common, they were practically patriotic. If apple pie was the dessert of America, Miltown was the emotional side dish. You remember the sense of wonder when the pill first arrived, promising a calmer, more bearable version of daily life. It felt revolutionary, like discovering a cheat code for adulthood. Parenting, easier, marriage, softer, social obligations, tolerable, even pleasant. Stress slid off your brain like butter on a warm skillet. But with hindsight, you now see the cracks beneath that smooth surface, how the calm came with its own consequences, how dependence crept in quietly, how your emotional world shrank to a manageable but muted size. Still, there's no denying that Miltown changed things. It was the first time an everyday pill wasn't just medicine but a lifestyle. It didn't treat a disease, it treated being a human in mid-century America. It wasn't targeted at the sick or the elderly. It was targeted at everyone. At overwhelmed mothers, exhausted fathers, anxious office workers, lonely suburbanites, restless teenagers. It became a cultural glue, binding together a society that couldn't quite admit how stressed it really was. You think about the advertisements, those glossy pages filled with smiling women who looked like they'd never experienced an intrusive thought in their lives. The glamorous Hollywood endorsements, the cheerful slogans promising a life of peaceful domestic bliss. You laugh now, realizing that half the country was just one missed dose away from crumbling into a puddle of emotions on the kitchen floor. And yet there's a tenderness in the memory. You weren't weak, you weren't lazy. You were living in a world that demanded perfection while offering almost no emotional support. Therapy was taboo, meditation was foreign, community help was minimal. Everyone played a role and none of the roles allowed cracks. Miltown slipped into that gap like a bandage for the soul. You look back now and wonder how much of your personality was you and how much was pharmaceutical smoothing. Did the pills make you patient or passive? Did they save your sanity or just postpone your breaking points? Did they help your marriage or simply silence the arguments you needed to have? It's impossible to know. History doesn't give back clarity. It only gives perspective. The legacy of Miltown is complicated but undeniably influential. It paved the way for Valium, then Prozac, then the entire modern landscape of mood management medications. It opened the cultural door to the idea that stress shouldn't just be endured, it could be treated, managed, softened, reduced to something tolerable. But it also taught America something else. Once you start medicating emotions, it's hard to stop. Each new pill promises a better version of life, easier, calmer, quieter. Miltown was the first whisper in a long conversation between Americans and their pharmaceuticals, a conversation that continues today and adds between episodes of sitcom reruns. When you think back on your own Miltown years, you feel a strange cocktail of gratitude and unease. Gratitude because the pill helped you survive a decade that demanded superhuman resilience. Unease because it showed how fragile that resilience truly was. Still, the memories aren't all heavy. Some are absurd, funny even. The dinner parties where everyone floated, the PTA meetings that felt like group meditation sessions, the arguments that never escalated because nobody had the energy to raise their voice, the strange shared fog that connected neighbours, friends and strangers in a soft haze of chemically assisted calm. You smile at it all, fondly, warily, wistfully. Because the legacy of Miltown isn't just about a pill, it's about a generation learning, for the first time, that emotional support sometimes comes in bottles when it really should come from each other. You sit across from your doctor as he opens a drawer so full of sample pills it looks like a tranquilizer piñata exploded. He rifles through it like he's choosing a candy flavour before handing you a handful of tablets wrapped in a rubber band. "Just try these," he says, as if giving out mood-altering pharmaceuticals is no more serious than recommending a casserole recipe. You stare at the drawer with a mixture of awe and mild terror. It's not organised in any recognisable medical system. There are no labels, no dividers, no attempt at categorising the mountain of pills spilling out like pastel confetti. It looks exactly like the junk drawer in your kitchen, the one full of stray batteries, rubber bands, expired coupons, and that one mysterious key you're too afraid to throw away. Except here, instead of old batteries, it's tranquilizers. Instead of coupons, it's samples of experimental mood stabilizers. Instead of the mysterious key, it's a tablet you've never heard of that probably promises modern calm. Your doctor doesn't seem alarmed. He sifts through the drawer with the casual ease of a man selecting his favourite pen. Maybe not this one, he mutters, tossing aside a bottle like it's last week's leftovers. Try this, he says, handing you pills so casually you half expect him to offer you a breath mint next. He doesn't use gloves. He doesn't check your chart. He doesn't even look you in the eye as he hands over what is essentially a pharmacological grab bag. He just smiles pleasantly, smoke curling from the cigarette resting in the ashtray beside your medical file, an ashtray that is full enough to qualify as a fire hazard. This is medicine, 1950s style, bold confidence, minimal oversight, and an unwavering belief that all human emotions can be solved with a pill shaped like a baby aspirin. You sit there as he explains the dosage, though explains is generous. He jots down something vaguely resembling instructions on a prescription pad, but his handwriting looks like it was created during a minor earthquake. Take one when needed, he says, or two if it's a bad day. You want to ask what constitutes a bad day, but he's already distracted flipping through your chart with the same enthusiasm you flip through junk mail. The doctor's office itself is a character in this story. The walls are a faded green that was once fashionable. The fluorescent lights flicker ominously. His desk is cluttered with medical journals, coffee cups, and approximately 7 overflowing ashtrays. A human skeleton stands in the corner, draped in a lab coat for reasons no one has ever questioned. Everything feels slightly dusty, slightly chaotic, slightly dangerous. But you trust him anyway, because everyone trusts their doctor, and because he speaks with the unwavering authority of a man who once treated someone with a cold by prescribing rest, fluids, and a very confident handshake. He's not irresponsible, he's just a product of his time. A time when pharmaceutical companies showered doctors with samples, lunches, gadgets, and persuasive research packets bound in glossy folders. A time when anxieties, nerves, exhaustion, stress, disappointment, and emotional implosion were all considered treatable with the right pill and an enthusiastic sales pitch. And that drawer, a chaotic treasure chest of sedatives, is the centre of it all, the birthplace of calm, the suburban fountain of serenity, the distribution hub of chemically manufactured peace. You take your little rubber-banded packet of pills and slip it into your purse. It feels illicit, even though you've done nothing wrong. It feels hopeful, even though you're not entirely sure what each pill does. It feels like stepping into a new chapter of your emotional life, one where the sharp edges of motherhood, marriage, and mid-century expectations might soften into something bearable. As you leave the office, your doctor calls after you. Come back any time if you need more. And you know you will. Not because you're weak, not because you're incapable, but because you're living in a world designed to overwhelm you, and someone just handed you the tiniest bit of reprieve, tied together neatly with a rubber band. And in this decade, that feels like a miracle. You stand at your vanity, brushing your hair into a perfect shellacked swoop, while your nerves vibrate like a telephone wire. The beauty magazines insist a proper lady must look serene at all times. Luckily, serenity now comes in convenient pill form, tucked discreetly between your face powder and cold cream. Your vanity is more than a piece of furniture. It's a staging area for the daily performance of being a 1950s woman. Every morning you sit before its triple mirrors like an actress preparing for her role. Calm, attractive wife who totally isn't falling apart. The lights are bright, the tools are ready, the stakes absurdly high. The beauty routine begins with powder, thick, fragrant, and impossible to remove from anything it touches. You pat it across your cheeks until your skin looks matte, enough to deflect emotional expression entirely. Then comes the lipstick, a bold red that promises glamour but smears at even the thought of stress. You draw it on carefully, trying to imitate the confident pouts of Hollywood starlets who reportedly wake up looking flawless and definitely don't have toddlers wiping their noses on them. Next is your hair, a sculptural masterpiece requiring more engineering than the interstate highway system. You curl, tease, spray, and pray. The magazines insist your hairstyle should stay in place during household emergencies, unexpected guests, and possibly mild tornado conditions. You do your best. But beneath the confidence of your beauty tools lies a quiet panic. Your hand trembles as you adjust an errant curl. Your breath catches as you remember everything that awaits you: breakfast, chores, errands, emotional labour. And somewhere deep inside, the familiar anxiety stirs, preparing for its daily battle. That's when your eyes drift to the pill bottle. It sits there innocently, nestled between your cold cream and your compact, like a tiny genie offering calm instead of wishes. You keep it on your vanity not because it's supposed to be there, but because this is where you need it most, right where you transform yourself every morning, right where your nerves are loudest. You open the bottle, tip a tablet into your palm, and swallow it with a sip of lukewarm water left over from last night, Within minutes, the hum of anxiety begins to dim. Not vanish, just fade, like a radio station you're slowly tuning away from. The trembling stops. Your breath evens out. Your reflection softens. Suddenly you can continue. It never stops amusing you that the beauty magazines insist serenity is part of skincare. As if calmness is something applied in circular motions with a cotton pad. As if anxiety is just a stubborn blemish you can conceal with the right shade. Their advice columns are full of gems like worried, smile more, stressed, try a brisk walk and cold water on your cheeks, sad, consider new curtains. Not once do they mention that half the women reading these pages are swallowing their feelings along with their morning coffee. As you finish your routine, the pill settles fully into your system, smoothing your emotions into manageable shapes. Your eyeliner glides on straighter, your lipstick looks more symmetrical, your hair cooperates with suspicious goodwill. You look in the mirror and see the version of yourself the world wants to see. Composed, pleasant, glowing, with a serenity that appears natural but absolutely isn't. The children burst into the room, chaos incarnate, demanding breakfast and attention, and answers to questions no person should have to answer before 9 a.m. Mum, why do people have teeth? Mum, can a fish drown? Mum, can we have pancakes? You blink once, twice, feel the smoothness of your medicated calm cushioning you like a velvet chair and respond gently. One question at a time, darlings. Your husband walks by, glancing in with a satisfied nod. You look put together. In the 1950s, this is the gold standard of womanhood. Hair done, makeup done, emotions neatly tied with a bow, and you are ready. Not because life is easier, but because your vanity drawer now contains the most important tool of all. Not powder, not lipstick, peace in pill form. You stir a pot of suspiciously beige stew while the pill gently sandpapers the edges of reality. You're vaguely aware something might be burning, but also does it matter? Dinner gets plated anyway, and your family eats in a peaceful haze, seasoning their food with tranquility and just a hint of apathy. Dinner in the 1950s has always been a performance. 1 part love, 1 part obligation, 1 part culinary improvisation starring ingredients of questionable freshness. But under the soft fog of Miltown, the entire process takes on a surreal slow-motion charm. You move through the kitchen like a serene ghost, drifting from stove to counter to sink with the gentle awareness of someone who isn't entirely convinced they're awake. The stew bubbles half-heartedly on the stovetop, shifting between beige and slightly more beige. You can't remember exactly what you put in it. Potatoes? Probably. Some kind of meat? Hopefully. A handful of spices? Maybe. But the pill smooths over the uncertainty. The stew will be edible or not. Outcomes feel less dramatic now. The stove emits a faint burning smell, the same way teenagers emit faint rebellion. You sniff once, recognize it as a familiar companion, and decide it's not a crisis. You stir the stew with the slow confidence of a woman who has accepted her culinary fate. Everything works out in the end, you remind yourself, even if the end occasionally involves smoke. Your children run through the kitchen briefly, one screaming, one sticky, one carrying an unidentified object that concerns you on a spiritual level. Before Miltown, this interruption would have triggered immediate panic. Now you simply nod and say, "Be careful," even though being careful is not in their vocabulary. You begin assembling dinner plates. Presentation becomes optional. The stew slaps onto each dish with a resigned plop, landing next to vegetables you steamed into oblivion. The peas stare back at you, more grey than green, but you sprinkle a bit of salt and call it gourmet. You place a basket of rolls on the table, rolls that somehow manage to be both hard and chewy, violating the laws of food physics. Your husband arrives home, takes one look at dinner and relaxes visibly. Not because it looks good, it doesn't, but because he too is floating through life on a gentle wave of pharmaceutical calm. He kisses your cheek and compliments the meal before even tasting it. This is the magic of mutual sedation. The bar is low and the gratitude is high. Everyone sits, everyone eats, everyone is calm in the eerie coordinated way of penguins or synchronized swimmers. The children poke their stew experimentally, find it unthreatening, and begin consuming it with mild curiosity. Your husband takes a bite, pauses thoughtfully and says, "Interesting." In previous decades, interesting from a husband meant disaster. In the Miltown era, it's practically a Michelin star. Your own taste buds seem muted like tiny employees on strike. The food tastes like something. Warm, maybe salty, maybe not. But you chew peacefully, appreciating the simplicity of nourishment unburdened by critique. Conversation meanders. The kids report school happenings in great detail, but the details float past you like bubbles, pleasant, weightless, non-binding. Your husband describes a day at the office where everyone worked efficiently, because nobody cared enough to argue. You nod sympathetically, spooning more stew into your bowl even though you can't recall finishing the first serving. Occasionally, a new smell wafts in from the kitchen. Burning, overheating, melting plastic. You tilt your head, consider investigating, then decide it can wait until after dessert. Dessert is a pie you bought from the store and transferred to your own dish so your family believes you baked it. Before Miltown, you would have felt guilty about this deceit. Now you simply admire your resourcefulness. The children eat it happily because children do not question dessert origin stories. As dinner ends, you look around at your tranquil family, half-full plates, soft expressions, gentle chewing, and feel an odd swell of gratitude. Not for the food, certainly, but for the quiet, the stillness, the absence of chaos. Dinner on Miltown is not glamorous. It's not delicious. It's not even fully cooked half the time. But it is peaceful. And in the 1950s, peaceful is sometimes more nourishing than anything you put on the plate. So tonight, as you sink deeper into your soft mattress, one without springs that poke you, one without children screaming in the next room, one without a doctor suggesting you take two and relax, take a slow breath, and think about the world you just wandered through. A world where stress came in casseroles and conformity, where housewives carried entire emotional ecosystems on their backs, and where one tiny pill promised to make everything feel a little quieter, a little smoother, a little less impossible. Miltown didn't fix life in the 1950s. It didn't make marriages perfect or calm the Cold War, or suddenly turn tuna casserole into something edible. But it did offer a moment, a pause from the pressure cooker of a decade obsessed with perfection. And honestly, you can't blame anyone for wanting a few minutes of peace in a world where expectations were as stiff as the hairspray. Because history, as always, is just people trying their best with whatever tools they have. Sometimes that's community, sometimes it's resilience, and sometimes it's a chalky little tablet tucked into a purse next to a tube of lipstick. So as you curl up now in your clean sheets, with air you can breathe and choices you're allowed to make, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to everyone who came before you, those stressed out souls who navigated the bizarre landscape of mid-century America, so we could learn from it, laugh at it, and appreciate how far we've come. Life may still be chaotic, but at least we don't have to iron our pillowcases or sedate ourselves for PTA meetings. Close your eyes. Let your breath slow. Let the day melt away, one peaceful moment at a time. Good night.